one of the founding advisors of Remotely, a company that is a professional network and think tank devoted to making remote work for everyone. And we are doing a series of fireside chats and webinars all throughout the fall to help people rebuild their culture, their idea of work, and how they get things done in this new environment. If you want to learn more about Remotely, you can find us at remotely.global, and you can learn about our membership at remotely.global/join and upcoming events at remotely.global/events. Today, I am thrilled to have joined me my longtime friend and colleague, Lori Luna, who is the COO of D3G Productions. Now, I'm going to wax a little poetic about Lori and embarrass her. Lori worked with me at BlogHer for 8 years, 8 years. Nearly 9 years. And I always call her my lieutenant. She ran our events. She was general manager of events. She ran all aspects of the events and oversaw the entire events team. And when I always use the point of time when I hired Lori as an example to people I'm mentoring or coaching, because I say, when we hired Lori, Lori had produced events that were far bigger and more complicated than where BlogHer was at the time. And I said, you want to hire people who can take you where you want to go, not hire people who have been where you've been. Always hire for the person who's smarter than you, knows more than you. Surround yourself with people who are going to take you further, make you better, and not just support what exists, but what can be. And certainly in the time that I worked with Lori, our events grew from being, I think, BlogHer 09 was 2,000 people. And, we ended up growing 1,500, and we ended up growing to 5,000 people at our peak and doing multiple events a year and adding so many elements to the events, not just the size, but they grew in number of days. They grew in different kinds of engagements and different kinds of things we were doing. And so now that Lori has moved on and co-founded and is a partner in a production company, D3G Productions, as COO, she has been right at the forefront of helping their clients make this transition from in real life events to virtual events and all that means. And considering that, I think we're going to be in this position for a long time, and that even when things get a little bit back to normal, we're not sure they're ever going to go back to the way they were. So I thought it would be great to bring Lori on and talk about some of the innovations that are happening and best practices. And when we're talking about this, you don't have to be thinking about, oh, I was going to produce a 5,000 person conference, whatever shall I do? You can be thinking about, how do you bring your team together? How do you do sales meetings? How do you do employee offsites, or what used to be called offsites? How do you do any number of events now that the in real life aspect has been so radically changed? And so that's what we're going to talk about. So thank you, Lori, and welcome. And thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's so weird to be on this side with you.
Yes, true. Lori has watched me interview many people.
I know. It's weird to be here with you like this, but fun. I'm excited. Thank you for having me and having D3G.
Of course. So I explained a little bit of your background, but just to give people a sense, what is kind of the scale of events that you've been overseeing, from the smallest to the biggest, and different kinds of audiences, just to give a sense of your background and the scope of what you've worked on?
Well, it's interesting because I started with Comdex, and that's just going to date me. And it was actually, I think, the last year, maybe the last 2 years. And, Comdex was 300 exhibitors, 500 exhibitors in the Las Vegas Convention Center, 100,000 attendees, content for days, breakouts, Vegas, come on, parties for days. And so that was my first introduction to events. And it was daunting. My role was significantly different, obviously. And then I moved on to ad tech, and we produced 3 events a year. And we were probably steady at about 12,000 people, technology based, primarily male attendees, a different vibe than, for sure when I moved over to BlogHer. And in between there, I worked for an event management company. So I got to see it from a different side.
Mm.
And then, lightning struck and I went over to BlogHer, and boy, did that take on a whole new life for me in terms of my career and how I manage things and what I saw, because we were definitely on the cutting edge then of how we produced our events mostly, I would say, in the inclusion and diversity and making sure that there was a space for everyone. And it's really molded how I look at events and what I see as being important. And it really has, it sticks with me, and I think it has stuck with everyone who has been part of that events team and bringing some best practices forward and things that I bring to our clients now. Being able to say, I understand where you are, I understand your side of the house, because my partners and the amazing team that works with us, they're all very, very technical and very smart. And I'm the one that has been on the other side of the house. So when a client is nervous about taking their event virtual, if I'm on that particular account, I can say, I truly, I understand you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a little bit different. But and now at D3G, I'm going to make a slight correction to my introduction that you gave me. I'm not a founding partner.
Oh.
I'm just a partner.
Okay. Oh,
yeah.
sorry.
I want to be clear to my partners who are potentially watching.
Well, I know a couple of your partners
That's
because
right.
they were on our team,
That's
our
right.
vendor team for BlogHer
That's
for
right.
many years, and they are, I
That's
can
right.
attest that they are fantastic and smart and did a great job, and also managed to absorb the BlogHer ethos in their work with us. So they were truly just part of the team.
That's
So
right.
thanks for making that correction. I
Yeah.
didn't realize. So, the thing is, people think of this virtual events as being something we're having to figure out all new from scratch. But in fact, there were often virtual elements to in real life events. I
Mm-hmm.
remember this is before your time with BlogHer, but we had a whole BlogHer in Second Life. For those of
Mm-hmm.
you who remember Second Life, we had a BlogHer in Second Life in 2007, and we had our own programming in there, and we had folks who therefore were able to participate. And there was we acquired somebody started on their own. This was very common in BlogHer. A BlogHer community member started BlogHer at home as a handle
Mm-hmm.
on a tag, because she couldn't come, and so she would do all sorts of fun things. And at some point, we kind of acquired it from her and took over doing things with it, to keep people engaged who were not physically on site. And we had times when we were live streaming conferences. We tried all sorts of things. What are the things that you think of as being sort of things that have been around for a long time that we don't have to think about as being cutting edge, really, but maybe more people are using them now?
Well, I think you hit it. You hit the nail on the head, right? You said the whole live streaming element. I mean, there's always been that element of, and it just depended on your budget, right? Did you
Yeah.
have the budget? Did you have the need? Was your audience broad enough? Did it cross over oceans? Were you in a place like, when we were at BlogHer, we would rotate throughout the continental US, right? And it gave people an opportunity. If they couldn't come one year, they might come next. But with live streaming, you always had that opportunity to bring the content to your audience wherever they were. And depending on the time zone, right, they would be watching it live with you, or perhaps you were then posting it on your own particular social channel, YouTube or whatever at the time. None of that is new. It's just how people are using it now. And then even, right now we're on Zoom. And I know Zoom is fairly new, but boy, has it sort of taken over this whole space right when we went into COVID and lockdown. And then, there were other platforms out there that were being used, but we weren't talking about it because there was so much focus, and there still is a lot of focus on that in-person experience.
Yeah.
That one-on-one, that shaking hands, the whatever it is. And so it was sort of secondary to your
Yeah.
to your real life production. And if you had the budget, I think you
Right,
could
because
you could do that. Mm-hmm.
we did typically try to video record
Correct.
keynotes. We didn't
Correct.
usually video record the breakouts because the
Right.
technical cost
Mm-hmm.
wasn't trivial. And live streaming we didn't always do because that was a whole different but often that was because you were dealing with the internet, the network setup you needed to have thousands of people using internet in your space and good enough bandwidth to
That's
also
right.
live stream high quality videos. So the technical considerations, actually, there's a part of it that kind of gets easier when you don't have that live element, which makes the network such an issue. And
Right.
obviously in our early years, we had getting the internet requirements just right took us a few years. Anyone who
It
went to
did.
the earliest BlogHers would remember that. So take us back to March. You are working this partnership. You're providing audiovisual production and technical services to in real life events mostly,
That's
and
right.
of course helping with the recording for
That's
later
right.
footage. And the pandemic hits. What was the first response of most of your clients and most of the prospects you were seeing out there? What was the first business response?
Can we still do this?
Mm,
Can we still bring the content that we want to bring to our audience in a way that maintains the integrity,
mm.
right? That you're not just here's a bunch of PowerPoints and you can read it at your leisure and you can just watch it at your leisure, but it was how do we stay on message, stay on brand, and still provide that same level of being remote. And I think also, right, is the panic factor. Holy,
Yeah.
what do we do now?
Well, because that is not the response I expected. I expected you to say, well, everyone canceled their events
Well,
and
some
then
did.
came to you later and said, okay, what do we do? But
Hmm.
I think if your response makes much more sense, that people for whom this is their business, I mean, they had to be asking, okay, well, we can't do it like this. What can we do? But from the outside, because I am now outside
Yeah.
event production, from the outside looking in, it just looks like everyone just went, all right, we're canceled, so that's really interesting that it was a quick response to say, what are our
What
alternatives?
with a lot of our clients, it was because some of them had already been live streaming, and so there
Mm,
was there was that familiarity with that element. And so then it was, do we just live stream? Do we just have one stage? How do we do breakouts? How do we do this? Do we have a platform? And a lot, I must say, I'm hesitant to drop platform names. I do have a
but that was
deck
gonna
that has
be my
resources.
next question was gonna be like, what were the platforms you were already using, and have there been a lot that have developed or been developing in the last 9 months? And is there just a plethora that we may be thinking of Zoom, but there's like a
Right.
plethora out there?
Oh, there so are. I mean, when I
Really?
was putting together this just sort of resource, because we use just a few that our clients are really happy with and comfortable with. Um, and then they range from being very simple and very little production value, very little um my brain, I'm sorry, very little marketing, assets and branding and things like that, to 3D.
Mm.
And you feel like you're in the booth with the sponsor. And so it really just depends on the client, what they're trying to achieve and what their goals are. But, and I am going to drop this one particular platform because Bizzabo, I'm sure a lot of people who produce events and have been in this space for a little while. They were traditionally a registration company, and they had already started upping their game, and they have really upped their game. And they've provided a very, I would say it's a stable platform. Of course, everything has its challenges.
Yeah.
Going back to the days of bandwidth and being on site, everything has its challenges. And,
Yeah.
when you think we're only talking about 9 months, the things that have happened, and there were already platforms out there that people were using, but now they're just getting more exposure because we're in this space.
Yeah.
But I did in the deck that I'll share with you to post after the fact. There's so many platforms out there, and there isn't one perfect platform, unfortunately. One platform might offer you a 3D element, another platform might offer you a better one-on-one networking, another one might offer a more cost-effective, but it's on the lower end of the production value. So it's a matter of budgets,
Yeah.
priorities.
Well, do you
And
see a big difference in what you would recommend for someone who wants to do a 20-person team offsite
mhm,
slash mixer slash, like get together internal versus someone who wants to put on a 200-person
mhm.
customer presentation versus someone who wants to try and actually do a conference? Do you think that there are just different tools for different kinds of events, or is it that you use them differently?
Both.
Okay.
At D3G, we're very clear. I mean, one of the things that we pride ourselves in is making sure we provide the right platform and the right level of support for the need of the event. We're not going to say, oh, you need to have us produce all of your keynotes. If really you're going to have your CEO just get online and talk for 15 minutes, it might be perfectly appropriate to use a Zoom or a Microsoft Teams. And it's not appropriate for us to come in and say, oh, we need to overproduce this.
Yeah.
Now, if the client wants it to be overproduced, and I don't mean that in a negative way, I mean it in they want that higher end production value, we're happy to do it. But it's just a matter of being honest and straightforward and saying, okay, what is it that you, the client, the event producer, want to achieve?
Well, let's
And
talk
then
about
finding the various different platforms that might work for that.
something I think must be an issue no matter the platform is, I mean, we've all been on a million of these now at this
Mm,
point, and it is rare for me to be, no matter the platform, it is rare for me to be on an event where at some point I don't freeze because I'm at the end of I mean, I should get a repeater or something. I'm sure there's a technical solution to my problem, but I'm at our router is 4 rooms down, right? So I'm at
mhm,
the end of the row and I know my bandwidth is not what it could be, or my connection is not as strong as
mhm,
it could be. But it's not always just me. I'm sometimes watching an event, and I'm sometimes watching a pretty high profile event, especially during that we had the election. So I went to a lot of political
mhm,
live stream events, and you'd think those people like would have it pretty nailed. They must be doing them every day, but there was always some technical issue of freezing, pixelating, whatever it might be, whether it's visual, whether it's audio, whether it's just the whole damn thing. Can can people, if they have the budget, can they do something about that? Is there, what do you do? What do you recommend to mitigate what I think are almost universal technical issues?
right. So, one of the things that we do, and again, I'm not trying to, be this cheerleader for my company, but I'm going to be, is that we have one of the things that we did rather right in the beginning was we invested fairly heavily into studios and technology and laptops that we could send speaker kits to. And we're actually using Skype, the same level of Skype that the broadcast news was using. It's the Skype TX, if I get that right. If my colleagues are on, they'll probably correct me after the fact. But we made a serious investment in that. And so what we were able to do is we were able to mitigate some of it. Now it does depend on the other end.
Wait, I need to ask a question. So
Yes.
I watched during the pandemic when both American Idol and The Voice, I watched those shows, no shame.
Yeah.
And they sent their finalists ring lights and all that stuff. Are you
Yes.
saying that when you're working with a client, you will send their speakers a
Yes.
kit
Yes.
with a laptop and a lighting,
Yes.
and then they return it?
Yes. Yes. They return it. And one of the things that we do, the reason that we do that is because we have the software that we need to easily patch in, and there's not a lot of room for error, hopefully, right? Because
Or
we
you can
dial
fix
right
it.
in, correct. We dial right into that laptop. I mean, we have some amazing people on the backside of this, doing all that work. And provided that the speaker follows our recommendations, make sure that no one is on your Wi-Fi at home. If you can plug into an Ethernet, make sure your kids aren't gaming. That kind of thing that's going to slow down your
Yeah.
connection. And we find that we're just able to provide that higher level. Now, that's not to say that we're not going to have something quirky happen. We have some clients that have speakers that are out of the country. And we were just doing an event that had speakers in Africa. There's very little you can do about that. The internet is just not solid in certain countries. And, sending a kit to another country isn't always the best answer, because it can get stuck in customs for longer than
Oh, yeah,
than
yeah,
you
yeah.
would want to, it won't get there till after their speaking event. But one of the other things that we're able to do is, if this isn't necessarily a live, right? If it's a pre-record, we can do some edits, but not always,
Okay,
right?
so let's talk about that. So,
Yeah.
and by the way, folks, if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, you can put questions in. We have someone moderating. Chris is moderating, and so he can pass the questions along to us. So this was something that surprised me when I was talking to you in preparation, in that for a lot of the events that you work with clients on, you actually have them pre-record at least the bigger, like, keynote moments. Is that fair to say?
We can. It's going to depend on the client, because one of the things is you just never know when you're going live. Like, we're live right now, and my internet power could go out and it's over.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you've got 500 or 5,000 people watching, that's a bummer. So a lot of times it's a security blanket
Yeah.
to record it. That way you have the recording. We also run a backup feed on our end, so that we make sure that if anything should happen on the platform, we can switch over to a backup. And that way if there's downtime, it's minimal.
And
So it's just a matter of risk. It's a matter of what is the level of risk the client is willing to take.
so,
For me, it would make sense that if it's someone super high profile and you want to make sure something doesn't happen,
yeah.
you might consider the pre-record. If you want to have that live feel like we have right now, although this could be pre-recorded and no one would know any different.
Right. Except for the Q&A part.
Correct.
But you could actually do the Q&A is low bandwidth, basically. To do, questions, you could actually do that part live, have the speaker there. And in
Which we
fact,
have done.
if you knew the speaker was there to answer questions in real time, and you could sort of have that exchange, that would be an interesting approach, right? That there's almost like a live chat. Like, we used to have live tweeters assigned to,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you could go back and forth. So let's get real about cost a little bit, though, because I think one of the things is that I think people think, oh, you get a Zoom premium account, you get a whatever, something pro, and you're good. But what you're talking about with this kind of production that is about guaranteeing a quality of experience and having the most risk management and mitigation in effect, that's not using premium Zoom and calling it a day.
Not usually.
Thank you for
Not
that
usually.
understated. Thank you for that understated reply. So we've had this conversation that
Yes.
actually you are not finding that it costs your customers less. Maybe correct me if I'm wrong again.
Okay.
It's not really costing your customers that much less to hire you to professionally produce these virtual events versus the live events. Or it is. I mean, there's no travel, there's no like, okay, so maybe I should rephrase this and not pretend I know what I'm
Okay.
talking about. What would you say is the cost comparison? Same event, but live versus professionally produced.
Sure. Obviously, it's going to depend on the level of production, right? But I would say that the bottom line is it's not necessarily going to be less expensive, because you're going to be putting a lot of your resources in a different bucket. So let's say you had $100,000 for audiovisual, and you had 50,000 for food and beverage, and you had X amount, 25 for whatever. I'm making numbers up, right? You may not use your food and beverage budget, but your AV budget might go up a little bit because you've got post-production, you've got video editing, you've got sending speaker kits when they would normally already be on property. So there's just different ways that you're spending your money. So I'm not suggesting that the event in its entirety is more expensive. I'm suggesting that you might be moving some of your money from other buckets into your AV bucket.
Yeah.
Right. So to suggest or think that, oh, all I have to do, like you said, is get Platform Pro. I'm just going to say platform because I don't want to,
Yes, you can be agnostic.
disparage or promote
any
particular platform. You would, I think you would be understating, and you would definitely get that level of quality.
Yep.
And for some people, like that 25 person CEO wants to talk to their attendee or their employees, that's perfectly appropriate. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that if you're trying to mirror an in-person event in terms of quality and production, you're going to have different costs that you might not have had while you were on site. And so you're just going to be moving things over, right?
Yes. And I think that the thing there is that when I think about the production level as we evolved, let's say, BlogHer, the production level we had was highly professional, very beautiful designed stage production, the video cameras with multiple views, the in every room having a professional setup. We had a lot of things that were, for us, what defined this as a professional event. And then I think what people are assuming is that if they have to do it virtual, they're just going to lose some element of professionalism. And the fact is that you don't have to lose some element, but you're going to end up paying for it. So it's actually your choice is about how seamless and professional and high value do we want this to look and sound and therefore feel to our users versus not. And so that's the choice that every host gets to make.
Right. And we still have the same level of production team on a virtual event that we did, let's say in your keynote room.
Yeah,
we still have the team, just like when we would I'm sorry, I just saw a note come up and it distracted me.
I'll take care of that. You keep talking.
Okay, thank you. We would have our show caller, and we still have a show caller, and we still have the person that's all of a sudden going from the speaker to their PowerPoint or whatever their deck is. And so we still have those people in the background that are calling the show and treating it just like we were on site. It's just we're doing it over a platform and not in a room.
That's
and the company, our client, they're usually going to engage their creative team to produce a great background image, interactive. You're seeing a lot of what's called the lower thirds, which is, someone's name and their title, and they come in and come out. And so there's still a lot of really cool, fun things that we're able to do, even though we're not all sitting in the same room.
Yeah. So we have a question about security issues from Jennifer
Mm,
Evers, but I'm going to ask you about multiple security considerations. So we're going to get to that in just a minute. But
okay.
before we do that, I had one more question I wanted to ask before we do that, which is, I feel like there are innovations happening in this space to accommodate, and they're kind of aligned with what are the hardest elements to replicate. When people think there's no replacing face to face, I
Mm-hmm.
think of things like, how do you replace serendipity or networking
Mm-hmm.
with your feet? Like if you have breakout rooms, how easy is it to vote with your feet? How easy is it to break up into breakout rooms? And
Mm-hmm.
even to the element of swag. I just attended TED Women. Was it TED Women? No, sorry, Forbes Power Women. And they had a virtual swag thing after the event. They sent you this email full of codes. Now, some of the codes were just discount codes, just like in a swag bag. Some of the things are really fabulous freebies, and some of them are like coupons for
Coupons.
10% off something that, and so, but they were each digital, and I had to go like, it was
Yeah.
a little complicated, but I just got I've gotten a couple of nice freebie things from that.
Yeah.
So, what do you consider to be the innovations that are happening that are helping to address some of these elements that we would consider hard to replicate about a face-to-face experience?
Yeah. I think you hit it again. No surprise about the, oh, I just lost my earbud. About the, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
See, these are the things about real live stream is the networking. I think that's the biggest challenge. And there have been quite a few solutions. There's, depending on the platform, you can break out into a one-on-one with somebody. Certain platforms, uh, you put in your criteria and it will match you in the background. And so those are the people that you can engage with. Some will just be open and you can engage with anybody on the platform. Some rather producers and clients, they don't want that particular thing because they want you to stay inside of, very much like being on site. They don't want to distract you from a session or from a keynote. And so they won't necessarily engage that right off the bat, or they'll engage it later, or they'll just take the risk. It's just a matter of, I just remember way back when we didn't want to have anything going up against a keynote. So we wouldn't allow those things. It's very much the same. If they do engage their networking, they might not engage it the entire time, or
Well, we wouldn't counter program, but we weren't.
that's what I mean.
Not like we were locking people in
No,
a
no, 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 no.
ballroom.
Counter programming. Yes.
I
Yeah.
want to
Yes,
assure
we
you.
did. We locked people in the rooms. We said, too bad. Once you're in, you're locked in.
That's it.
That's it. You're stuck. But networking is a challenge. It's
And
definitely a challenge. And
so
the swag. I know that a lot of companies are doing what you just said Forbes did, right? Is they're sending you to a virtual location and they'll send it out. Some clients are doing very cool things and they send it in advance. Let's say they're going to do um, like the mixology. And so they'll
yeah.
send the mixology kits in advance so that you're doing it together. We'd be on together and somebody would be walking us through how to mix the drink right, or whatever the case may be. So it goes to your budget and how you're using that money, because you probably had some sort of swag line item in your budget.
Yep.
And now it's, how do you use it? It's just,
Right. I mean, you had a tote bag, you had,
mm-hmm.
you had various things that you had money in there for. I mean, I got that even this summer. My congressperson always has a summer barbecue for supporters. And so she did it virtually, but yeah, and because it was local, because it's my congressperson, they dropped off at our house just on my doorstep a bag. It was like a little bag, and inside it was a couple of tumblers, plastic tumblers, and some cookies, and some, like, there was stuff in there sort of relevant to what she might have had at the barbecue. And I thought I was very surprised, and it was delightful, actually.
Mm-hmm.
There was something about that was very delightful. Surprise and delight, as they say.
Yes.
I always think about the, the serendipity aspect. Who are you sitting next to? Who are
Mm-hmm.
you bumping into? Who do you hear from that you didn't like? I always used to recommend when people go to, whether it's a BlogHer or South by Southwest, always go to some session that it's not your normal topic, because you may just hear an idea that blows your mind. And there's something about audience movement. I always thought the thing people didn't understand about producing events sometimes was how much you can really think through and try to manage audience movement and where they go and how they go, and that a room with 300 people in it can look crowded or it can look empty depending on how you
Mm-hmm.
set. There's all
Mm-hmm.
these things you can do to create an experience. um and so I always think that might be the challenge of online, because you don't control what's all around me. How do you create an experience? What are some things you've seen that are, help create that feeling of having an experience that's been crafted?
Yeah. Again, it's going to go to the platform. There is a platform out there that is a 3D platform, and it has this look like you're in the room. Obviously, you're not sitting there. I think that still is something that needs to be addressed. And personally, I mean, I might be missing it altogether, but I haven't seen. I mean, we can track, we have metrics, but that doesn't necessarily allow me as an attendee to know that I'm sitting next to you as an attendee, someone that
Yeah.
maybe I want to meet.
Yeah.
That's where I think some of those elements of the different platforms that have that one-on-one networking still allow you to, gosh, is Elisa in the building, so to speak? I don't know where she is right now, but if she's around and it has approved to receive messages, I can still connect with you.
Yes.
So I think right now we're not in that place. And I'm not sure that's something we're ever going to be able to replicate unless someone comes up with something where you can actually you see each other.
I
And
would.
sort of like what we're seeing, remember during the Democratic National Convention when they had all the faces, and a lot of the talk shows are doing the faces,
Yes, they are.
and like Conan had you sent in a picture and they did the cutout in the seats, and obviously you're not live, but
I was just
there's
at an event. What was that event? It was about the new city. I think it was called the new city, and they
Mhm,
had something Topia, not Utopia, but something Topia was the name of the tool, where it was like Second Life, honestly. If
mhm,
you wanted to
mhm,
participate, you went, and then you had a little avatar and you could like move around in this space and see the other avatars. Um, there's a whole, so speaking to Jennifer's question about security,
mhm,
on the one hand, digital provides the ultimate security. I don't have to go in that little space and be seen by
mhm,
anyone if I don't want to be. I can be incredibly anonymous
mhm,
watching, and have privacy, or I can opt in. It's all on me. Whereas if you're physically at a space, you literally can't. If you want to go see the programming, people are going to see you, and you
mhm,
can't literally hide yourself like you can in a digital space. Um, but that was one of the things we talked about when we were preparing for
mhm,
this, is the security. I know in the early days that everyone was talking about Zoom bombing, everyone was talking about
mhm,
unauthorized access. I
mhm,
experienced it, with only one event that I attended, which was, of course, produced by by the Riveter, which is a women's space. And they had Zoom bombers, and they had to like
mm,
shut down
mm.
the Q&A, shut down the chat, and and of course they could toss those people out.
Sure.
But what are you typically seeing as security measures that people are taking to avoid, I guess, that kind of interference? And is it something, I feel like I don't hear about it anymore. So I wonder if
Mhm.
it was just took a few tweaks and now like it's kind of solved, or what's your perception of the security considerations?
Well, I think when we were talking about this, there's a couple different things that have happened with security. One, it's that, right? It's making sure you don't have these encroachers who are going to post vile material and say horrible things, right? Um, and and a lot of it is just not making the event public, making it invitation only, and having sort of a, having to put in an access code and things like that, right? So that you can easily remove someone. It's
Yeah.
also a couple of our clients, you can't use your personal email addresses. It has to be a business email address. And so then they vet it and they go through it and they make sure. And so before you even get in, they're making sure that their audience is who they expect it to be.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so there's that. But the other thing that is happening is, right, is the whole just the security of the content and
Well, I would expect for, especially for internal meetings.
yeah, right. But also, like now online security is so important in terms of making sure that the platforms are meeting the security protocols of the client. And when you are producing, we have a client who is a security company and they have, a multi-page list of security questions, and you get graded and you have to have a certain security score. And it goes down to questions like, do your contractors have access to the servers? And if they do, how much access do they have? And it's feeding information one way versus two ways, right? So the online security is different than if we were in real life. I mean, we had security, but it was different
Yeah.
because people weren't necessarily breaking into your computer and getting confidential information or proprietary information or whatever the case may be. So there's a lot of one-way feeding with the data versus the other way. So a client that we have won't allow us to automatically feed the data from a platform back into their internal systems. And
Mm.
I'm just talking about attendee data. They won't have it because there's a risk that
Oh,
that
interesting.
there's malware or there's viruses or whatever the case is. And so it becomes a manual download, here's your CSV and you upload it into your internal systems because they're the risk. So that kind of security is different than
Mm.
what we would experience in real life.
Mm.
And so that's been an interesting, and
Interesting.
it takes a really long time to get these questionnaires filled out. It can take like 30 days
Wow.
because they can be custom to the client's security levels and protocols.
Mm. Yeah, I wasn't even thinking about that. I think
Right.
Jennifer was asking about whether pre-recorded versus live has a
Mm.
different level of security protection, or I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I guess I would assume that if you pre-record, you've and you don't have a live chat
Mm-hmm.
going on during the
Mm-hmm.
pre-recorded, then that's locked
Mm-hmm.
down.
It's
There's
pretty
nothing.
safe, right?
Yeah, yeah. There's not. That's there's a lot more to that. That's the thing. I think every time I talk
Yeah.
to you, I'm like, oh, there's a lot more to this than I would meet the eye, or that would initially occur to me. So we talked about the business considerations on the cost side and how it may not
Right.
cost, or you're moving your costs around. I know that in a couple of the clients that I've talked to this year, and a couple of just the friends I've talked to, who colleagues who are event producers, there's huge question and concern about the revenue side,
Mm.
for people who are producing events for revenue. For
Mm-hmm.
example, can you charge money for your attendees?
Mm-hmm.
And how do you show value to sponsors? And how do
Mm-hmm.
sponsors
Mm-hmm.
have an experience that makes them eager to sign up? And if this is the way your events are going to be for the next year, you gotta
Mm-hmm.
figure
Mm-hmm.
figure it out. So um what have you seen the trends are on charging attendees?
Mm-hmm.
And is there a certain bar on how big the event is, or how long the event lasts, or how, like, what are you seeing there? And also, how are people handling sponsors?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So The charging and the to charge or not to charge is so far most people are that we've been working with are providing free events, and
But were they before?
no. Mm-mm.
Oh, wow.
And so it's one of those things where they've gone all the way to, okay, look, we know the experience is different, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think there's a concern about perception of the value, right? So I charge you $100, but you feel like it was worth 10 cents. So then what do you do? Right? What are the repercussions? I think it's a slippery slope. My own personal opinion is that you go from charging and then you go to virtual. And so now you're sort of, what do we do? What do we do? And so then you don't charge. And now you've got a whole bunch of back end conversations, right? Because you had revenue coming in that somehow, some way would offset this event. If that was the case, if it never mattered that it was a profitable
Yeah.
event, then that's, it's neither here nor there. But it is a challenge with, and I don't know all the specifics in terms of pricing, because that's, I don't need to get into that with a client, but there have been conversations where, pricing for sponsors has gone down because the experience is different. And they, like in the previous conversation we had about being able to sit next to somebody and shake a hand, now they're having a whole different experience. So their ROI could be completely different, and their expectations, I think it's a managing expectations thing too, because especially in the beginning, we didn't know what to expect, how many people would come. And our clients have seen a nice lift in terms of registration,
Yeah, but what's the attrition
but
rate?
then the attrition,
Yeah. Well,
it varies from, is it a user conference, is it a public conference that anybody is welcome to in that industry? It really does vary. I mean, some people have seen attrition up to 80%. So they have these huge registration numbers. And that's also a financial impact, because a lot of these platforms charge you by registration, not attendee.
oh,
So
ouch.
you're paying for the person just to register. But like in real life, if there isn't an investment, if I don't have at least some investment, it pops up on my calendar and I'm like, oh, I'm really busy, I can't go right now. I can catch
Well,
it on demand.
it's so funny. As you well know, our experience was that we started out BlogHer charging way less than it cost us to produce to users.
Mm-hmm.
We had to subsidize that with sponsors. And over
Mm-hmm.
time, that became it's not very scalable, because sponsors don't want to pay 5 times as much for the same sponsorship just because you have 5 times as many people, and yet your costs go up based on the number of people. I feel like these platforms should figure out a way to solve for understanding that the rates of adoption versus attrition, registration versus attendance, are very different than they would be for live events, and maybe cut people some breaks on that, because that's just crazy. Because what we found is, when you don't charge money, your attrition is huge. The attrition on the main event was very small. And then for a few years, we experimented with an unconference, and we found
Mm-hmm.
we had to charge at least $50. Once someone had
Mm-hmm.
paid $50, they felt like they were pretty committed. But I mean, I know, and we have a question from Facebook as well. I know that I sign up for
Mm-hmm.
many more things than I attend, partly because they all overlap because everybody's doing things, but partly because I kind of want the link to look at it later. If I'm signed up, I'll probably get the link.
Mm-hmm.
And partly because it sounds interesting in the moment, and then maybe I'm not as interested. And because it doesn't cost me anything, it's very, very
No
little,
harm, no foul
no harm, no foul to me,
to
right?
you.
Do you have any do you have any sense? Is there any industry data yet on how much time people are spending a week or a month or of their time in virtual events? Like, has Zoom released anything or anything that you've seen that kind of estimates that?
You know what? I would have to go look. I have not done that research. But I will tell you that screen fatigue, some people will call it Zoom fatigue. Again, I don't want to disparage a particular platform. I think it's become, Zoom has become the word Kleenex,
Yes, a
right?
little bit. Yes.
And so, but screen fatigue is real. People, I see things here and there where people are saying, we didn't used to always have to be on screen when we would do video, when we would do conference calls. Why do we have to always be on screen now? Why can't we just still be on the phone? And I think it's a psychological thing where we're all still trying to connect.
Yes.
Because when we were in the office, even though we might be on a conference call, I could still go over to you and talk to you and have lunch with you or coffee or whatever. And I think that I think we're craving that connection. And it's really challenging for people who, unlike you, who are more introverted, someone like me who's a little more extroverted, I like seeing you on screen.
Yeah.
I don't even care if your background is messy or you don't have makeup on or
What do you
your
say?
shirt is nope. Why do you think I've got this virtual background? But I don't care about all that.
Yeah.
I just want that connection. And I think that that's happening not just professionally but personally. I think people
Yeah.
are really having a hard time with this, and
Yeah.
you hear about it especially with younger kids, etc. But I don't have the data, so I
Yeah.
can definitely follow up with you. But there is a thing out there, Zoom fatigue, screen fatigue, where people are just over it.
Right. Well, what I appreciate about signing up for events, though, is that a lot of times I don't have to be this
That's right.
obviously. I have to be on screen. A business conference call, I have to be on screen. But if I dial into like that Forbes event I
Hmm.
did dial into TED Women, I did dial into the New City, I did dial in, or even just smaller things that are, community based. I don't
Hmm.
always. I can choose,
Hmm. Hmm.
and actually, the biggest thing I discovered, which I can't believe I didn't know for a long time, was that you can hide your view of yourself in Zoom anyway. I don't know if you can in other tools, but you can. I think having yourself on screen is very distracting and pulls focus. And so I definitely figured out to stop doing that. I think the main thing is that you can't tell when someone's not looking at you, so you feel very on.
Right.
Um, but we only have a few minutes left, and if there are any
Okay.
more questions, please submit them through Facebook or YouTube. But okay, so we know there's screen fatigue, and we know there's things that are hard to replicate, and we know. But what do you think when let's say the vaccine rolls out, and by next fall, let's say fall, people are starting to have events, and let's say by 2022 we're kind of back to
Normal.
normal-ish, right? What do you think we'll keep from this time? For example, do you think we'll go back to shaking hands? Do you think with strangers, like, or will we go back to just shaking hands? Will we wear masks? And what good things will we keep? Do you think real life events will continue to keep the virtual elements once they go back to real life? Like, what do you think is going to survive past when we kind of feel normal again and we're having big events?
I think hybrid is unavoidable.
Yeah.
We will be hybrid. And I think that planners out there need to now, and companies now need to start accepting the fact that their budgets are likely to go up, because there's going to be an expectation of a hybrid opportunity. And uh, for people who can't travel, or a company now, see, here's what's happening is people are spoiled because they can have 5 or 10 people from a company go to the same event, whereas they wouldn't have been able to afford that before. And
Yeah.
so the expectation of attendees, I think, is going to change. And so the hybrid model is going to stay. And there's in my deck that I have here, I have some resources and there's some articles about that. And one of them is hybrid is not going anywhere. Get ready, lock
Hmm.
in. It's
Well, I
going
think
to
that's
happen.
true. I think that's true of remote work in general. Why don't you
Right.
show us real quick, and we'll put it, I don't know how we'll attach it, but we will. But
Okay.
why don't you walk us through real quick the kind of resources that you put together for us? I'm sorry I didn't ask
Okay.
you about that
No,
sooner.
it's fine. It's fine. Give me 1 second. Let me do this right because I want to just share the PowerPoint.
Yeah,
So
I
I'm
see it.
assuming, okay. So one of the things that
You
I
can put it
did
in
here was
presentation
just,
mode though, so we don't see.
sorry, thank you. Thank you. There we go. So one of the things that I did here was make sure that I just gave a few examples of some of the platforms that are out there. I want to be really clear that these are not recommendations or endorsements.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so that's the asterisk. I just want to be clear.
Yeah.
Um, and, we have used all or most of these since March.
Okay.
And so that's why I was really comfortable with these. I also just put a list here of other virtual, there's a list here of all the platforms and their different pros and cons and what they bring to the table. I think the other thing that's going to change for once we get back in real life is you're going to start seeing more closed captioning or transcription expectations because so many people are doing this now, whereas
Yes, I've
the
really
whole
noticed that
ADA,
improve.
yeah, the whole ADA thing was if you got asked, you're required to provide, right? But if no one ever asked for it, you didn't have to provide it. And now nearly all of our clients are offering some sort of closed captioning or post-event transcription so that it's reaching more people and that whole accessibility. So again, along with the expense of virtual and having a hybrid, you're going to start seeing the expectation from an attendee to uh, have some sort of closed captioning or post-event transcription, right?
Yep.
So the next thing was I just put some articles in here that are more recent about what is coming next and what what it's going to look like after the fact. And even I saw an article this morning that I had to drop in here was how the inauguration and
Oh,
how that's going to be treated. And you're not going to see thousands of people together
yeah.
because it's just not safe.
Yeah.
And so that doesn't necessarily mean anything, right? Just according to our current occupant, it means everything, but it really doesn't.
Yeah.
And so it's just talking about how they will have that virtual component and how they're really encouraging the virtual component
Yep.
and not being. So these are just some articles that I found really interesting and some links. And again, I'm happy to share that. And I think we're getting pretty close to the end. So I just have my own little thought bubble, if you will. And basically it's just know your true north, know what is real to you and what is important to you. And the bottom line is to whatever you do, whether you are in person or virtual or a combination, is to stay true. Don't let this new environment change what is important to you as the organization. Events are fluid. They change all the time.
Yeah.
That's the one thing about them. And you can never and you should never change the integrity of your message and your commitment to your attendee and your sponsor. We always have to keep that in mind. We need to remember why we do this
Yeah.
and stay true to that. And so that would be my final thought on this call is to, regardless of how you showcase your message and your product, is to always maintain your integrity.
Well, that is great advice. And, events were always a very fluid, as you say, experience that
Mm-hmm.
every year you had to revisit and figure out what worked, what didn't, and make changes and keep it fresh. and keep it.
Right.
You always had to keep it fresh so that people would come back year after year.
Right.
You always had to introduce new things. So for
Right.
event people, I think this has been challenging from a technical point of view to figure some stuff out. But the idea of evolving how you do your events is something that so existed in that world.
Yeah. Yeah.
So thank you so much, Lori, for
It
joining
was
us.
so fun.
Yes, it was great
Thank you for
talking to you.
having me.
Thanks for all the great advice. And where can people find you?
Well, in my deck, I will give my email, but it's really easy. It's just Lori at D3G Productions, plural.com. And then it's D3Gproductions.com.
Great. And this has been a remotely webinar. I'm Elisa Camahort Page. You can find us at remotely.global. We are trying to make remote work for everyone, including, in this case, remote events. So thanks and have a great day.